The rain had just begun when Daniel Carter stepped through the glass doors of the company headquarters, carrying the same battered suitcase he had taken to Germany 3 months earlier. He had barely made it 5 steps into the lobby when his CEO stopped him in front of everyone, held up a torn contract, and said the words that made Daniel's stomach drop, "You're fired." Daniel stood frozen, still wearing the jacket he had traveled in, while 20 employees stared at him as if he had suddenly become a stranger. What none of them knew was that Daniel had spent the last 3 months sacrificing sleep, missing his little daughter's birthday, and risking everything to save the company's biggest international project. And what happened less than 10 minutes later would change not only Daniel's life, but the future of the entire company. Daniel was 38 years old and had been raising his 9-year-old daughter, Emma, alone since his wife passed away 4 years earlier. He never talked much about the hardest years. He simply worked, came home, cooked dinner, checked Emma's homework, and tried to be the father she needed. His salary was modest, but he was proud of one thing: he had never missed a school performance, a parent-teacher meeting, or the nightly ritual of reading Emma a story before bed. Then his company, a major engineering and logistics firm, won a massive contract in Germany. The project could bring the company millions, but it was already in trouble when Daniel was assigned to lead the final negotiations. The previous team had made several mistakes, and the German partners were threatening to cancel the agreement. Daniel almost refused the assignment because Emma had a school recital coming up. But his manager promised him it would be only 6 weeks. Daniel kissed his daughter goodbye at the airport and promised he would be back before her recital. 6 weeks became 3 months. Germany tested him in ways he had never imagined. Daniel spent long nights studying technical documents, learning unfamiliar regulations, and working through complicated negotiations. His German was not perfect, but he spoke enough to earn respect. More importantly, he listened. When the German engineers complained about delays, Daniel did not blame them. When his own company blamed the German side, he demanded proof. Slowly, he discovered something disturbing. The project was not failing because of the German partners. Someone inside his own company had been secretly changing numbers, deleting emails, and sending incorrect financial reports. Daniel documented everything. He sent copies to his supervisor and requested an internal investigation. Instead of receiving support, he received a cold email telling him to stop creating unnecessary problems. Daniel knew then that someone powerful wanted the truth buried. One night, after working until nearly 2 in the morning, Daniel received a video message from Emma. She was sitting on her bed holding a small birthday cake with 9 candles. She smiled bravely and told him she had saved him a piece. Daniel watched the video 3 times before finally crying. He had missed her birthday. He had missed the moment she became 10 years old. But he also knew that if he walked away from the project now, everything he had worked for could collapse. If you believe kindness, sacrifice, and second chances still matter, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the people who look like they are losing everything are actually fighting battles nobody else can see. 3 weeks later, Daniel finally solved the mystery. He discovered that a senior executive had been secretly redirecting parts of the German contract through another company owned by a relative. The evidence was buried inside dozens of financial files, but Daniel found it. He immediately prepared a complete report and sent it to the chairman of the company, the one person whose authority stood above everyone else. Then Daniel flew home. He imagined Emma running toward him at the airport. He imagined carrying her suitcase, taking her for ice cream, and finally being able to sleep in his own bed. Instead, when he arrived at headquarters the next morning, the CEO was waiting. The CEO, Richard Hale, did not shake his hand. He did not ask how the project went. He simply threw a folder onto the table and accused Daniel of causing the German contract to collapse. Daniel stared at him in disbelief. The documents were full of false claims, including statements that Daniel had exceeded his authority and caused financial losses. Daniel tried to explain, but Richard cut him off. Then came the sentence Daniel would never forget: "You're fired." Daniel looked around the room. His colleagues avoided his eyes. One woman quietly lowered her head. Everyone knew Daniel had been the one who worked hardest on the project, but nobody wanted to challenge the CEO. Daniel picked up his suitcase. He thought about Emma. He thought about rent, groceries, school fees, and the promise he had made to her about a better life. For one terrifying moment, he wondered how he would tell his daughter that Daddy had lost his job. He reached the elevator. Then a voice echoed across the lobby. "Mr. Carter. Stop." Everyone turned. The company chairman, Victor Reinhardt, was walking rapidly toward them. Victor was rarely seen at headquarters. He was known as a private, serious businessman who avoided unnecessary appearances. But now his face was pale, and he was holding a phone in one hand. He looked at Daniel and spoke in fluent German. "Bleiben Sie stehen. Sie gehen nirgendwohin." The lobby became silent. Daniel understood every word. "Stay where you are. You are not going anywhere." Richard's face changed instantly. Victor turned toward him and asked, still in German, why Daniel had been fired when Daniel had personally saved the German contract. Richard tried to answer, but Victor raised his hand. Then Victor revealed something nobody expected. He had personally reviewed Daniel's report. And he had verified every single piece of evidence. The German partners had not only confirmed Daniel's version of events, they had specifically requested that Daniel remain involved because he was the only company representative they trusted. Victor then opened the folder Richard had used to fire Daniel and placed it beside Daniel's original report. The numbers had been altered. Signatures had been forged. Emails had been deleted. And the person responsible was not Daniel. It was Richard. The CEO suddenly looked less like a powerful executive and more like a frightened man who had realized the walls were closing around him. Victor turned to Daniel and apologized. He said the company had failed him. Not as an employee, but as a human being. Then he offered Daniel something no one in that lobby expected, the position of Director of International Projects, with full authority over the German division. Daniel stood silently. He could have shouted. He could have demanded revenge. Instead, he asked one question. "Will I still have time to take care of my daughter?" Victor looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. "You will never have to choose between being a good father and being a good employee again." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. That evening, when he finally opened the door to his small apartment, Emma ran toward him and wrapped both arms around his waist. Daniel dropped his suitcase and held her tightly. "I thought you forgot my birthday," she whispered. Daniel closed his eyes. "I could never forget you." He handed her a small wooden music box he had bought in Germany. Inside was a tiny paper note that read, "For the strongest girl I know." Emma hugged him again. Weeks later, Daniel returned to Germany, not alone this time. Emma came with him during her school vacation. She saw the office where her father had worked, the streets he had walked, and the cafe where he had spent lonely nights writing reports. The German partners welcomed them warmly. Daniel never forgot the day he had been fired. But he also never forgot what happened afterward. Sometimes losing a job is not the end of a story. Sometimes it is the moment life removes you from a place where you were never truly valued and puts you exactly where you belong. And Daniel finally understood something his wife had once told him before she died: success was never about how high you climbed. It was about whether the people you loved could still recognize you when you reached the top. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of courage, kindness, and second chances. And before you leave, comment just one word: second chance. Maybe someone reading your comment today needs to believe that their story is not over yet. Because Daniel went to Germany as a struggling single father trying to save a project. He came home as a respected leader who had finally learned that doing the right thing may not always protect you from injustice, but sooner or later, the truth has a way of finding its way into the light.